Hi there, it's me, Stephen Thomas, with Reports on Housing with another housing debrief. Thank you for joining us, and I invite everybody, if you like our videos, please hit that like button, gently tap it. And also, if you like the content, subscribe to our channel. That is how we get this information out to everybody out there so that they can make great decisions based upon real solid facts and data, not a narrative that we're trying to push. You can go to reportsonhousing.com, by the way, to subscribe to one of our many reports. We have reports all over SoCal and in the Bay Area. Utilize the coupon code BOO for a free month. And the most recent report that we've worked on, and this is kind of across the country as well, rates rise, values slip. So there's not a lot of people talking about values coming down. They're not going to plunge down, but with rates as high as they are right now, there's some extra pressure, even though we have a very limited inventory, for values to come down a little bit. Last year at this time, values were coming down at a greater clip, especially in areas, high cost areas like Southern California and the Bay Area. But so right now, that is kind of what is occurring. So this week, we're doing a freaky economic predictions. And this whole thing is not my freaky economic prediction. I have a forecast for next year. I will be doing it on our YouTube channel later on this year in December, running out of this year anyway. So in the middle of December, we will have our forecast for 2024 for all of Southern California and the Bay Area. So we are in uncharted waters right now. And I want everybody to understand that. It sounds like I'm going to pick on some government agencies, but really what I'm trying to do is illustrate how we are at a time frame in our economy that we have really never been before. And it is mostly thanks to COVID-19 and the pandemic. Yes, we've had a big pandemic before, but it's a totally different ballgame. We now have these smartphone devices and we have internet, and we're able to find out what's going on real time around the world. We can FaceTime with people all over the place around the world, and it's just a smaller world versus back in the day during the Spanish flu. Much different time period, and we don't even have economic data that goes back that far that's really solid compared to about the mid 90s is when everything data got really good. Some data goes back to the 80s, but it gets even better with a whole bunch of different metrics in the 90s. So COVID-19 really changed things. And if you remember back to COVID-19, we had a problem with a run on toilet paper and a run on just about everything. I took photos of my supermarket like so many other people did because it was just like ransacked because we've never gone through anything like this, which will cause a problem instantaneously in supply chains because you were unable to get the supply to the market, and then you have COVID, so there are not as many trucks on the road. So there was a myriad of problems right out of the box, and that was with the supply chains. Then you had countries that were closing down their ports, and there was just so many issues that the supply chain became a real problem. And then once the boats started to come, there just weren't enough people to work this. This was actually, somebody was flying in an airplane and sent this to me. This is actually Long Beach Harbor and all the boats that were parked out there. Later on, they decided it was too much of an eyesore from the shore. They pushed those boats out further. But of course, that has since subsided. But we did have a supply chain problem. We had problems with like lumber. Lumber spiked up to incredible heights. And then you throw in that the Ukraine war, which they're like the breadbasket of Europe, which just puts more strain on food supply around the world. And as a result of all of this, and then you have lots of money that was given to everybody, around the world. It just wasn't here in the United States, that everybody's pockets were lined with money. And that was to get us through the pandemic to the other side when you're closing down when you're closing down businesses and you can't go out to dinner and you can't do what you normally do and you couldn't go to the ball game and you couldn't go to see a concert. There was so much that happened, and it just brought everything to a standstill that we needed, all the different governments needed to build that bridge to get to the other side of the pandemic. Now, you can argue, and I would argue, that we did too much and we continue to do too much and we continue to spend too much compared to prior to the pandemic. So inflation was an absolute issue. And now we're going to talk about the Federal Reserve and how they have approached many different things. I want to point out this. The Fed official, they saw transitory inflation and lasting quite a while. And you guys remember that. This was Wall Street Journal. Everybody was talking about transitory, and it seemed like it could be transitory at the very, very beginning. But you have to understand, if you take a deeper dive into this, at first, if you remember, at the start of 2021, we actually had a consumer price index. They like it to be at 2% or below. It was actually below 2% at the start of 2021. But by the time we got to March, it started to rise. And by the time we got to June of 2024, that is the big arrow. And that is what I am showing you right there. It was really up there. It was at 5.3%. And it was below 2 earlier in the year, and it had climbed to 5.3%. So for them to say it was transitory at that point, right when we got to there, that's where a lot of people, myself included, started to say, this doesn't seem very transitory when we have inflation that has absolutely skyrocketed. But there had been other times where you've seen these charts where they went up really high and they came down, or they went down really low and they went up really fast because of COVID. But by the time you got to the summer, you were looking at cost of goods where you were thinking this is not going to subside anytime soon. And now the other arrow that I'm pointing to is the actual peak. It was June of 2022, and it was at 8.9%, just shy of 9% inflation. That was unheard of. It was off the charts, and you can imagine at that point, yes, we had lost transitory. It was no longer in our vocabulary by the time we got to June of 2022. But the Federal Reserve was a little bit late to addressing what they needed to address. They started in March of 2022. They really knew that there was a problem prior to that, but they didn't. They saw that this is no longer transitory. By the time it got to November, December of 2021, and that was too late. So I do want to point out where so many people talk about that right now is very similar to the 70s and the early 80s. And I'm pointing to the Himalayas with those green lines compared to where we are on the right-hand side. You can't really compare where we are to the 70s or 80s. It is completely different. It had everything to do with this pandemic. The 70s and 80s were that we already had entrenched inflation. Inflation was already a problem. It got to be a bigger problem, and it was finally fixed in the 1980s, and that's by jacking up rates as high as they possibly could. And that's Paul Volcker. And that is Jerome Powell is the head of the Federal Reserve, and he invokes Paul Volcker like as if we have 1980s inflation. And he's read the book. The book is sitting there in his office. It's on his desk. You can actually see it. And it's just not the same thing. So you have to fight this thing different than that, because every single round that we do, different recessions, we have different blowups in inflation. Every single round, it's a little bit different. And this is completely different. If I go backwards and I look for a time period, because we like to stick everything into a fine little box. So as an economist, we're looking backwards, trying to find out, hey, where have we been? When have we been here before? And how is this going to play out? The problem is we haven't been here before, and we don't know how it's going to pan out. That's why we're in uncharted waters. Now, I do want to point out that the Fed in September of 2021 projected that they would have one hike in 2022. That's right, September of 2021, one hike of 0.25%. They were still on this transitory kick, but they knew that they needed to do something, but something was little. 0.25%. Now, they control the Fed funds rate. It's the short-term rate. That's connected to credit card debt. It's connected to equity line of credits and car loans. That's what they control. So that's the short-term rate. Long-term rates, like in mortgages, 30-year mortgages, that more has to do with investors. But investors like to, they're going to invest based upon what the short-term rate is and where they think it's projected to be by the Federal Reserve. So down the road, they will already be where the Fed needs to be down the road based upon what the Fed is saying. So they automatically start adjusting rates. We saw rates starting to go up at the very, very start of the year of 2022. They did not make their first initial short-term rate change until the first quarter, or until March of 2022. Yet interest rates were already climbing prior to that. So I'm going to point out some dots, and that's because the Fed is notorious for releasing what they call the dot plot. They release these dots. These dots are different Fed presidents and different people that are in that room that are actually stating where they think. This is the Federal Open Market Committee gets together just about every month. It's a little bit longer, and what they do is they get together and they decide where these dots are going to be. Now, they only do this on a quarterly basis, and they release these dots. So they actually discuss where they want to be, but they release the dots on a quarterly basis, and then they make they state whether they're going to hold, go down, or go up in the short-term rate. And as you can see, this is quite a while ago. This was December of 2021. Now, what they decided in December of 2021 is that, of course, they were at near zero as far as 2021 was concerned. Now, in 2022, they said that they would be anywhere from 1/4 to 1.25%. Each one of those dots represents somebody in that Federal Open Market Committee. And that was for 2022. And in 2023, they thought they would be between 1 and 2.25. Now, I am going to go quarter by quarter, and I know that this is going to be a long haul, but you're going to see how they've changed their tune constantly. They do not know exactly where they're going to go, and this has totally changed over time. So this is where they were in December of 2021. This is where they were in March of this year. Now, all of a sudden, they're talking about 1.25. This is 3 months later, 1.25 to 3.25% for 2022, and now in 2023, 2 to 3.75%. Now, keep in mind, they went all the way up to 4.5% during 2022, so they still didn't know quite where they needed to be. And now we're in June. Now they're saying 3 to 4% for this year and 2.75 to 4.5% for 2023. And then we get to September of 2022, every 3 months. Now they're saying 3.75 to 4.75 for 2022 and 3.75 to 5% for 2023. And now we get to December of last year, and that was 3.75 to 4.75 for last year, and 3.75 to 5% for 2023. Now watch, they're going to increase this dial a little bit more. Now they're saying 4.5% for 2022 because that's where they ended the year. They were unanimous, 4.5%. 5% to 5.75% for 2023. And if you see this, they're actually projecting where they're going to be for 2024 and 2025, and we'll get to that in a minute. But then you get to March of this year, and now you're 5 to 6% for this year versus 3.5 to 5.75% for next year, 2024. And now we get to June of this year. Now you're from 5 to 6.25% for this year and 3.75 to 6% for next year. And the one that just came out, look, they're even higher, 5.5 to 5.75%. They think that we're probably going to do one more jump for the rest of the year, perhaps, or they're going to stay where they're at right now, 5.5. Now, For 2024, they're going to go between 4.25 and 6.25. Now, if you remember, one back, they said they're going to go from 3.75 to 6%. It looked like that next year that we were supposed to come down in the short-term rates, which means that we would come down in long-term rates as well as far as mortgages are concerned. But you see where they're at now. Now they're at 4.25 to 6.25. That change from 3.75 to 4.25 is 0.5%. There's a 0.5% switch in their thinking, which means we're going to have this new thing that everybody's talking about, higher for longer. Like as if they've been talking for a long time, higher for longer. They have not. I've already demonstrated that every single time they meet, they've just been cranking this dial up a little bit more. Their dial has been slowly but surely been cranking higher, and it's been going higher and higher every single time they look at it, which means, do they really know where they need to be? When they thought that they only needed to do in September of 2021, 1/4 point change for all of 2022, and yet we had 7. So to all the way from 0 to 4.5 versus 0 to 1/4. So you can see they don't quite know where interest rates are going to be. And if you actually look at this last one, now they have on here, it's new, it's added to this. They're not only prognosticating where they're going to be in 2024, but also in 2025 and also 2026. And let me tell you, they actually have no idea. These are like made up dots. I don't know if they sit around and drink whiskey and have wine and beer and sit around, smoke a cigar. I have no idea what they do to come up with these dots. It almost does not make sense. There's no way that they can prognosticate where they need to be a couple years down the road. They're having trouble enough prognosticating where they need to be later on in the year. Right now, they kind of know where they need to be later on in the year. Why? Because there's not much later on in the year, but they're having trouble figuring out where we're going to be next year. So for everybody to sit there and say, this is where they are going to be, let me tell you, I can show you over time that they are wrong all the time, and they're constantly pivoting where they think they need to be. So now I'm going to get into what they said in October of 2007. And if you were in housing or connected to housing or owned a house, you knew of people that were already starting to get upside down and were having some issues. In October of 2007, the Federal Reserve projected the GDP for 2008 to be plus 2%. It was actually down 3.8% because it was the beginning of the Great Recession. The issue with the Federal Reserve is they tend to be reactive and they're very data dependent looking backwards, but they're having trouble trying to look forward by using, trend analysis and figuring everything that they've done and everything that's going on in the economy, how is it going to project out going forward? And that's kind of the issue that a lot of people are having, especially since we're in uncharted waters. So they're very, very data dependent, which means that they're very, very backwards thinking, kind of like driving the car in the rearview mirror. And it's time to stop. It's time to stop that at this point. Because now, as far as that GDP is concerned, I'll show you. We knew that there was a real problem because we were already at 500,000 foreclosure filings by the time we got to when they announced this in October of 2007. We were at 500,000 foreclosure filings, and it was going up at a very, very rapid pace. The banks couldn't even keep up with how quickly this was expanding. And I just want to point out today, for all those bears that are out there, that this is the delinquency rate across the United States currently. It is still at decades lows. So this includes anybody that's been in forbearance or gone into forbearance, and forbearance is still a thing, that the long-term delinquency actually has been relatively low. And that's because the banks have all figured out how they can patch this thing up and make things work down the road. And there's not going to be a lot of delinquency because there's a ton of equity out there, and there's a million other reasons. If you don't understand this, then watch one of my other YouTube channel presentations that we've done before on the foreclosures and the foreclosure waves and the increases, because we can actually show you why that this is not going to happen. I'm not going to discuss that at this point today. Instead, I'm going to talk about another thing that we saw that we knew that we had an issue going into by the time we got to October 2007, and that is a glut of homes available. We went from less than 2.5 million homes on the market to 4 million homes on the market in 2007. We knew that there was a problem in 2006, and then it got way worse in 2007. And you could see that we had our total housing inventory peaked out at 2007, 8, and 9 at 4 million, which, by the way, right now, it's just a little over a million. We went from a glut of homes and very low demand because we went into the Great Recession. And as a result, we had market times that were off the charts. My expected market time gauge, anything above 150 is considered a deep buyer's market. We were at 400-day expected market time plus everywhere we were looking. And right now, today, with a little over a million, we don't have anything close to that because we have very low demand, but it's matched up against very low supply. So that's the issue right now, but I'm still, you could see how it was pretty plain, and just looking at housing, and housing was one of the big drivers because we had a problem with the way that we did loans, and we had a credit crisis practically, and that is what happened. So now we're going to talk about this soft landing. But first, I want to bring in our sponsor. I want to thank our sponsor once again. She's back. Pillar to Post Home Inspectors. They're the ultimate home inspection experience. And Pillar to Post, they have interactive 300, this is standard with every home inspection, interactive 360-degree visual inspection summary. I mean, brings everything to life. And then they have PTP estimates. And what that is they estimate the cost for any of the inspection items that come up. So you know exactly what you're facing once you get the report, so that, hey, these are the items that need to be addressed in the house, and this is how much it's going to approximately cost. And then also, if you would like a premium and prestige package, they have these detailed floor plans so that with all the dimensions and everything, so that you can get that out to contractors for estimating and all that. And they also provide a digital owner's manual for the entire home, because I don't know how many people have a manual for their car. It's pretty cool to have one for your home as well. So you can go to Paula Camarena. She can be reached. Pillar to Post, 714-794-5295. That's Paula, 714-794-5295. 5295. Thanks, Paula, for your sponsorship. We really appreciate it. And now back to the program. Soft landing. Yes, that's right. We are talking soft landing. Everybody's talking soft landing. I hear it all over the place. If I hear soft landing one more time and I watch CNBC or read Wall Street Journal, it's just one of those narratives that everybody likes to talk about. Let's talk about soft landing. Well, let's talk about soft landing. These are different economic articles. Of course, there are plenty of them that come out regarding soft landing, but I want to show you the dates. These dates are all from 2007. Economists, job reports confirm soft landing. Fed chairman projects soft landing for U.S. economy. How about Fed sees soft landing for economy? U.S. economy on track for a soft landing. Dallas Fed. They were wrong, though. That was 2007. If you remember, the Great Recession happened in 2008, which once again begs the question, do they really know where we are right now? I told you, we are in uncharted waters, which is why they keep on saying data dependent. But I'm just saying this is the time to explore, trying to extrapolate where we're going to go from here based upon current data and everything that the Fed has already done by bringing interest rates from 0% to 5.5%. And this kind of explains it the best. Flaps down, gear down, ready for a soft landing. So also, earlier this year, if you look at the date of this article, this is from NBC News, a mild recession is now likely this year, Federal Reserve says. And this was January, at the very start of this year, right after we rang in the new year for 2023, a mild recession is now likely this year, Federal Reserve says. And of course, we did not have a mild recession. As a matter of fact, GDP came out today and it was extremely strong, just shy of 5%. Now, Fannie Mae, that's another government agency that I want to just show you a couple of things really quick. And one of the things is right here, you could see that they have an economic forecast that they do. They forecasted GDP for the first, second, and third quarter of this year. And this was the very beginning of this year. They do this every single month. And January of 2023, they thought that the first quarter, second quarter, and third quarter, of which we were just about at 5%, GDP was supposed to be negative, which meant we were supposed to go into a recession. Well, we hardly went into a recession, as we all know. And then let's say the economic forecast now, the one that just came out in October, what are they talking about for 2024? Once again, negative numbers, not quite as negative as January of this year. For next year, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, all three negative GDP numbers. Even though they have pretty accurate for the third quarter of this year, they're saying it's going to mute and slow down. So if you think that they know exactly when this recession is going to start, they don't. Nobody really does. I keep on saying there is no way. It's kind of like fishing in a murky lake. I don't know if there are that many fish down there. I don't know if I'm going to get a bite. I think I'm going to get a bite. That's pretty much where we are as far as recessions are concerned. And then we're going to talk about interest rates because they project every month where they think interest rates should be. And with that said, this is where they have thought interest rates should be. So this was April of 2023. This is when we had that regional banking crisis. And what they said is we should have interest rates at 5.9% during the third quarter, and right now today at 5.7%. And then by the time we get to the fourth quarter of next year at 5.2%. We are close to 8% right now. So this is a little bit off. Then we can go to August of this year, just a couple months ago. They thought that we would be at 6.7% by the fourth quarter and at 6% for the fourth quarter of next year. Well, of course, that didn't happen. Now they're in October, earlier this month, they said we'll be at 7.3% for the average for the quarter of 2023 and 6.7% for the fourth quarter of 2024. And they're like continuously cranking this dial because they have no idea where we are headed. They really don't know. So my whole point to this is not to pick on Fannie Mae and the Federal Reserve. My point on this is we give everybody a lot of credit, and when they come out with these predictions, markets move, and we say a lot of things, and we think that, boy, that's what they're saying. This is what they do every day. However, they're still wrong a lot of the times. So we've got to take everything that we hear out there with a grain of salt and know that that's probably not how things are going to play out. Just like this higher for longer, most likely is not going to play out. As a matter of fact, that's not in our forecast. Our forecast is it won't be. Yes, well, as far as higher for longer, if that means we're staying at 8%, no. I do not believe that we're going to be at 8% down the road. We have that in our forecast. We'll be bringing that to you. I think it's December 14th. You can mark your calendar. We'll have that. We'll drop our forecast on that date. You know what? Thanks for joining us. You can subscribe to any of our reports by going to reportsonhousing.com, and our code for this month, for right now, is BOO. So put in the coupon code BOO, and you'll get a free month. And we're going to do our final podcast. We're going to record it tomorrow, and we'll drop next Wednesday, called Haunted Housing. And so wherever you like to listen to your podcast, we are there. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a fantastic finish to your week. We'll see you on the other side. Enjoy your Halloween.